Hi. Okay, so this is chapter 4, the chapter on perception. Perception is a fascinating topic, partly because I believe that perception is the foundation for how we think and how we behave. And if you think about that, if you can understand how people think and behave, then you have great insights into that person, and very much determinations of thought and behavior is directly connected to perception and how we perceive. So we'll go through this quickly, again knowing that you can stop and rewind for any parts that you need to listen over. So moving right along. Okay, so in terms of perception, a couple of things to remember. It is a process. It is not something that is static and stationary and fixed. It is something that is ongoing. Your book talks about this notion of first-order realities and second-order realities. It has a lot to do with the notion of perception and is not something I'm going to elaborate in this lecture. So be comfortable and be familiar with it enough from the textbook description. Now here are the steps in the perception process. It is has several different stages, the first of which is selection. Selection is essentially noticing. It's how you notice certain things. We don't attend to every bit of stimuli that bombards us all the time. If we did, I think we'd be a bit crazy. We are constantly bombarded with different sounds, different sights, different smells, a lot of things, and it's just, if you've ever been in a situation when you feel like you're noticing everything, you have that bit of sensory overload, and you know, it's a very heightened, acute sense of awareness that you almost don't know what to pay attention to because there's so much stimuli. So our body normally filters that, and there are certain things that we pay attention to and certain things that we don't. So what determines that? Well, this list here gives you a good idea of some of the things that trigger what you notice and what you don't. The next stage beyond selection is organization. Organization is how you make sense of it. Okay, now you've noticed it, you've perceived it, now what do you do with it? You have to begin to process that information. And we have these mental boxes, mental ways of categorization, what are called perceptual schemas, that are the process of how we make sense of information. So here we have physical constructs. I'm going to notice the fact that he was so tall, he was like 6'6", and so it's the height, or maybe it's her size, or maybe, you know, it's his hair color, or the color of her eyes, and it's something on a physical construct. Role would have to be, you notice the badge, and so you put them in a category. You notice the white lab coat, and you put them in a category. Any type of uniform, you put them in a category. Somebody is in a position as they are the teacher, they are the one, the principal, the one in charge in a classroom environment, the leader, and you categorize them according to that kind of role. Interaction has to do with somebody smiles, and so you attribute that they're very open, they're friendly, they're welcoming, in terms of the way that you interact. Psychological might be them on their own, not so much in an interaction as, oh, she's real moody, or he's a real kind of self-absorbed, sarcastic individual, or whatever. Then punctuation. This is interesting. This is how we attribute cause, and where you punctuate an event determines where the cause is. So it's very much cause and effect. For example, does he stray to other women because she nags, or does she nag because he strays to other women? And you know, there's another example here you can see that kind of helps you understand that concept. Interpretation, the third step in the process. So we have selection, we have organization. Third step is interpretation. And here's where you come up with a meaning for what you've seen and how you've organized it. And you begin that process of understanding it, and that idea of making sense of it. And there are various things that determine how and why we interpret certain things the way we are. Relational satisfaction. If you're really happy in a relationship, you tend to view a partner's behavior as more positive. If you're not, then you'll attribute more negative connotations to it. Your expectations. Do you expect to get dumped? And if you expect to get dumped, then you're going to interpret certain things that are said or done that are in alignment with that set of expectation. That's where self-fulfilling prophecy can come into play again. Personal experience. Maybe you have you've been mugged. You got robbed at knife point, at gunpoint, and now you're walking down, taking a shortcut across the parking lot late at night, and somebody else is in the parking lot, and all of a sudden you are interpreting that as threatening because of your past experiences. Certain assumptions about human behavior. Would people classify you as a Pollyanna, as an optimist, as maybe a little naive, very trusting? Or would they classify you as a cynical pessimist, perhaps? And sometimes we have certain assumptions about human behavior as inherently good or inherently evil, and that determines how we perceive and how we evaluate. Negotiation is the process by which we attempt to influence each other's interpretations and each other's perception, and there's this negotiation process that goes on, and I find that in particular very interesting when you can have two people experience the same event and have two entirely different descriptions, what your textbook calls two entirely different narratives about what just happened, and the two people can then begin to negotiate the process in an attempt to influence each other's interpretation. And again, this idea of narratives, the idea of shared narratives. When the two people agree on the narrative, when the two people agree on they have consensus about the interpretation, about the perception, about the stimuli, it obviously it's not a stressful experience. It can become rather bonding. Okay, some influences on our perception. Physiologically, your senses, your age, you can read the list. In terms of senses, I remember years ago when my roommates had a very acute sense of smell, probably the keenest nose I've ever encountered on a human, and she could tell you when your chicken was starting to burn if you walked to the back of the house. She just was on it. Years ago, I remember being at the beach with somebody who had 10-15, instead of 20/20 vision, they had 10-15 vision, and the young, he was in the Marines, and his job duty had to do with bomb detection because of his vision, and so obviously that's going to influence it. Age. Certainly, as you've aged, you probably feel like your perception of time has changed dramatically than maybe it was 10 years ago. Health and fatigue. Sometimes you're very tired, you've been up late, it's getting close to finals, it's that point in the semester, and you're just exhausted, and the littlest things begin to irritate you. Hunger. Have you ever gone shopping, to the grocery store on an empty stomach? And if so, undoubtedly you've put a whole lot of stuff in your cart that you would normally not have looked at, but your hunger kind of like everything looks so good. Biological cycles, obviously people tend to think of women first, but it's been proven, by the way, that men have biological cycles as well, just not quite as acute. Neurobehavioral challenges, your book explores this a little bit more, but certainly even something as simple as ADD can affect perception. Other things, it's also influenced by the psychological influences like your mood, you're just having a bad day, you suffer from very low self-esteem, so therefore you reject certain messages that aren't consistent with that poor self-esteem. Social influences, this has a lot to do with norms and roles. There are certain roles as to what a male is supposed to do, a female is supposed to do. Sometimes it's based on your occupational role. There are times when, hey, certain things are fine for Suzanne the mom, Suzanne the friend, Suzanne the wife, but Suzanne the college professor can't do these things. And so depending on which hat, and which environment, and which context I'm in, that's going to influence my perception and also your perception of me. And so your book goes on to that in more detail. It's also influenced, of course, by culture, which is just amazing how much influence culture has, and most of us aren't even aware of it. So, and that's the end of this section. I'm going to upload this, and then we'll get to the second part.